One of the things that I've always been proud of is that we have a fair amount of people listening to this program who are incarcerated. So a couple of years ago, we're talking, I guess maybe now it's 3 years ago, a gentleman was listening to me in prison. And he gets in touch with me through someone else. Someone else emails me on his behalf and says that this fella listens to me every day, loves the show, and he wants me to consider writing a letter to the parole board for him. Now, I said, well, before I do that, I'd like to talk to him and see what the story is. So he ends up. I talked to him, and I am persuaded that his whole incarceration was largely a misunderstanding. So he gets parole. He gets let out. Now, maybe this should have been the first red flag, but he said that when we had dinner for the first time that he would pay. And I ended up paying, but that's fine. It's happy to help a fella out, especially a fan of the show. And then we got to know him a little bit over the years, and there were several red flags. A great time to hang out with, a great fella to, have a drink with, have a cigar, whatever. But there were several red flags, one of which he changed his phone number several times. Another of which is I invited him to an outing with some friends one time, and I had told the friends that he was, previously incarcerated. But then he starts messaging each of my friends the next day and says that he wants to take, I think it was 30 orphans to an MMA fight. And can they each give him some money to take these orphans to an MMA fight? For starters, I didn't even know that people still use the term orphans, but sure enough, apparently this fella does. And I think that's when people first started realizing maybe something is up with this fella. And he'd be all over social media, traveling all over the place, taking photographs with beautiful women and having a good time, living like a rock star lifestyle. And at least from my perspective, it's not clear what he was really doing for a job. So ultimately, last month, he's arrested again. And for a time in New York, he was on New York's list of the 17 most wanted fugitives. And and then if you put his name or any of the aliases he uses online, he may be listening right now, so I'm not trying to be offensive at all. But if you put in his name in any of these search engines online, all sorts of testimonials pop up of women that were scammed by him or that he tried to scam. And basically, it's some version of these lover scams where you do, bad things. You make these women fall in love with you, and then you use them for money. And I'm oversimplifying it. There's other examples of this. But I felt so bad that I had any role in getting this fella out of prison because he was not reformed at all, in spite of what he represented to me. And I don't think he was in there as a result of a misunderstanding as I initially thought. So I think this is a textbook example, as always happens with me, always, of me being susceptible. I guess everybody is, but I think I'm more susceptible than most. Me being susceptible to flattery. And because he was a listener, I wrote a letter to get him out of prison. And look, he might have gotten out of prison anyway. But at least in part because of my brilliantly written letter, and I'm not trying to sound immodest, but this was a really good letter. You would get this letter and you think, what? Let this guy out of prison right now. How could somebody get a letter like this? I am really embarrassed that I was kind of scammed. I mean, I didn't spend any money other than the dinner or the drinks that I bought him a couple times. But I really feel like I was duped by someone who's a professional con artist. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is the other side of midnight. So where does that leave us now? Well, I have decided that I am not doing this again, ever. So I know we have a lot of listeners in prison, very pleased to have them. But I am no longer making any effort to get anybody out of prison. Now, I hate to do that because there are a lot of people in prison that shouldn't be there. However, I feel I'm so burned by this and so jaded that if you want to get out of prison, you have to look elsewhere. I am now playing no role whatsoever in intervening in people's criminal cases to get them out of prison, unless you're an immediate family member. That's kind of my role.